Hello everyone, Ramadan Kareem to you all and a warm virtual welcome. My name is Nada Salha, I'm part of the KHDA team and I'm here to help facilitate our What Works X webinar with you along with my colleagues Hajar and Maya. So welcome to you all. It's hard to believe that we've completed 7 weeks of distance learning. And I would like to start off by expressing my heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you for making this journey possible and for transforming the way you teach children and you are caring for our children. We're going to be starting off today with a quick Mentimeter. So if you don't mind, may I please invite you to go to a second device and go to menti.com. You need, let me just bring it up on the screen for you. Okay, if you can just kindly go to menti.com. For those that have joined our previous webinars, you're quite familiar with this, and enter the code 896000. So just go to a web browser and type in menti.com and the code. We'll be using menti.com as part of the webinar today by asking you a couple of questions and engaging with our awesome audience this afternoon. Okay. So as I said, it's been 7 weeks. I'm interested to learn from you what new skill or skills have you picked up over the last 7 weeks? I'll just give you a moment to enter your responses. Wow, I love the first one that's come up, filmmaking. These may be new skills that have helped you in your own work, or perhaps it's something you've learnt that you've always wanted to learn but did not have the time, or perhaps new things that you've been forced to learn. Google Forms, resilience, absolutely. We've all had to call on a lot of resilience over the last 7 weeks. Video editing, time management, Zoom, patience. As a parent, I've had to also learn a lot of patience over the last 2 months as well. Asynchronous lessons, creative videos, online correction, and that's something that we'll be going through in today's webinar. Video tutorials, technology, IT savvy, teaching via video call. Google, or was that supposed to be Google? Or maybe that's something new that I need to look up myself. Teamwork, CBD, Microsoft Teams, the platform we're using today. Hard work. Yes, it has been a lot of hard work. A lot of resilience, patience, time management, a lot of those soft skills that we've had to really call upon to make all of this work for ourselves and for our students and for our education community. So today we have around 150 people attending the webinar, with about 50% of those being teachers, 20% of those being from senior leadership teams at schools, and the remaining including teaching assistants, governing board members, members of inclusion, and also wellbeing teams on the call. So welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for being with us today. Well, we've got 120 new skills in that beautiful word cloud. So just take a minute, look at the word cloud as it's developing and reflect on what we've been able to gain as a collective, even in the midst of a pandemic. Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. That's a beautiful word cloud there. We'll be returning to Mentimeter, as I mentioned, during the webinar and also at the end for your feedback. So just leave that to the side for now as we move on. Thank you once again. So now let me rewind to 2012. A movement known as What Works began and would come to change the culture of education in Dubai. It was a series of events that was anchored in a strength-based approach and was focused on collaboration. So What Works X, which is where we are now, is pretty much the same concept, just the platform has changed, and perhaps with the support of technology, it even allows for more teachers to participate and share what is working in their own schools. So today's webinar is about how do we know that students are learning and how do we assess this during the distance learning period. We are joined today by Luke and Jenny from JESS, who will provide a 20-minute presentation that speaks to this very topic. Their presentation will be followed by a 20-minute Q&A session, including questions that have been submitted during the registration process and some questions that will be asked during the live session as well. So as much as we'd love to hear your voices, your microphones have been muted, but please do share your questions using the Q&A feature to the right of your screen, ensuring that your questions are on topic. The Q&A session will be facilitated by my awesome colleague Hajar, who I will now pass on to introduce our presenters. Just let me get Hajar up on the screen. Hi Hajar, go ahead.
Hi Nada, thank you very much for the introduction. It's now my pleasure to introduce our presenters for the day. Jennie, Burke, Deputy Head Teacher of Secondary Jumeirah English Speaking School, and Rees, Assistant Head Teacher, Jumeirah English Speaking School.
Thank you, and over to you, Luke.
Yeah, I've been asked to talk first as Jenny gets the presentation ready, and I've got to say hi to everybody. My name's Luke Rees. I'm the Deputy Head at JESS Jumeirah, the primary school. I've been living and working in Dubai for 9 years. I've been at JESS the entire time, and I'm still enjoying myself hugely. And I just want to say to everybody who's listening, you are amazing people. You've dealt with rapid change, things that have been evolving so quickly over the last few months, and the things that you've done for the children and the communities that you serve has been absolutely phenomenal. So we're privileged and humbled to sit and chat with you today. We're by no means the experts, and we've turned this presentation into as practical as possible. So we've avoided a little bit of the strategy and tried to make it really, really practical for you, and hopefully you have something to take away.
Hi, I'm Jenny Burke. I'm Deputy Head at the secondary school at Arabian Ranches. I've been at JESS for 11 years, so I know it quite well. Thank you for turning up this afternoon. I know it's been a really busy week for you. We see this as an opportunity to celebrate all of the great work that the JESS teachers and JESS students are doing. I can't say we have all the answers, and I can't say it hasn't been without trial and error and frustrations along the way. But like Luke said, hopefully you'll be able to take some ideas back to your school and likewise share back with us.
So just looking at the context of the school, if you're not familiar with JESS, we're actually based on 2 sites. I'm here today representing the primary school at JESS Jumeirah. It's from FS1 to year 6. We've got about 703 children at the school. It's a UK British curriculum school. Yeah, we've been around. The JESS Jumeirah site has been around since the 70s, so we've been here for quite a long time.
And I work at Arabian Ranches. I'm representing the secondary today, but Arabian Ranches at JESS, if you're not familiar with it, is a 3 to 18 school from FS1 all the way to year 13. At secondary, we have a GCSE and IB curriculum, similar to lots of schools in Dubai. Just a little bit of the context of secondary as well, that we launched a digital strategy 4 years ago. So our current year 10s when they were in year 7, and that's given us the launch pad to really run with this distance learning program. We switched from paper exercise books to digital books, like I said, 4 years ago, and so that's really given the students the confidence. I will make a point of saying that we're not paperless, but we capture all our learning in a digital format.
Though on your screens there, we've just tried to capture some of the main tools that we'll be talking about today. Again, these are the tools that we use. Please, we don't want you, should you be using any other tools, to immediately switch over to using the stuff that we are using. Use the things that you're comfortable with and the things that you have in place. We just wanted to sort of capture, in terms of this new vocabulary, which I didn't know about really about 7 or 8 weeks ago, asynchronous and synchronous and assessment overall. The primary school models at the moment are largely asynchronous with a synchronous element to them. So by that, I mean, in the early years, we release content and activities for the children on Sway, and then higher up the school, we release activities and for children on Seesaw, and the children are able to access it in a flexible way that suits young families with young children. Then we look to Microsoft Teams to do some of our synchronous learning alongside OneNote, and then in the primary school we're using Classroom Monitor as our assessment tool or tracking tool.
In the secondary school, we also have a hybrid model. We're predominantly a synchronous model. We have our school timetable that staff and students are following through the day. And the real aim of that is to build on the work that we've been doing already with OneNote particularly. We use OneNote and Teams to facilitate learning, but we also have a model that allows children to work in different time zones. Probably like your school, there are children stuck in different places. So everything that we do means that students can access it from elsewhere. And we kind of think of OneNote and Teams in secondary as our digital uniform, in the same way that we have a school uniform to set standards and have a shared expectation at school. We have a digital uniform that also shares those expectations. So everybody from year 7 to year 13, no matter what department you're in, use OneNote and Teams as the platform, and that's really helped us to be able to troubleshoot and have a kind of consistency across the school. Okay, so with the update from Teams, I'm hoping you'll be able to hear the sound on this video.
Jenny, there's no sound.
Okay, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and then I'll reshare it. Sorry.
Yep, the sound's coming through.
Like everyone, it's a learning curve.
Today we're back with the 5-minute workout. We're going to be working on our upper body today, our triceps, our shoulders, and our chest.
Technology, where do I begin? You've helped me through my life so far and been there for me through thick and thin. Last week I was feeling lonely, sad and oh so glum. But today you've shown me that isolation can be fun. I've seen my friends, we've had a laugh. We've made fun of the teachers, and all the while I've been online, I've learnt some great new features. Maths and English were a breeze. Science and forces were daunting. But Mr. Wernham's morning workout was really quite exhausting. There's no time for boredom when you're around. Technology, you're a lifeline. I Skype my grandma every morning to make sure that she is fine. Technology, there's just one thing I ask of you. Help us find a cure, please. It's the only thing you have left to do.
I hope you're also smiling as you're watching the video. It certainly reminds me of all the things that I love about teaching. And even though we don't get to see the children, it's really nice to be able to see their learning and see the range of things that they're getting involved with. I thought before we started to talk about assessment and how we're ensuring students are making progress, that I would kind of remind you all, and it's what we always talk about at JESS as we move online, that the online pedagogy is the same principles as the effective pedagogy that you know so well in the classroom. So when you're looking at assessment, remember that you've got baseline data available to you. Remember the previous assessment data that you already hold on the students. If this had been term 1, I think it would have been quite different for us all. It's term 3, you've already got 2 terms of assessment data. Don't forget that effective questioning helps you to assess student understanding. Effective written feedback, effective verbal feedback, checking understanding against objectives, and summative assessment. All of this should still be available through the online experience for students. And what Luke and I are going to do is talk through how some of that looks online in the primary and secondary setting and use that as the basis for this presentation. So Luke will begin by talking you through a day in the life of JESS distance learners. As you've already seen on the videos, some of it from their side, but looking at how it is from our side too.
Yeah, so just in front of you on the screen, it's just sort of outlining the fact that in the primary school, you do your best to make sure that they have full understanding of what they'll experience through the day. So you can see there that they'll have the morning video from the teacher, check in every day, just let them know how they're getting on, and in there they'll set out the things they'll be learning through the day. And you can see number 2, they have a checklist for their day shared with them. That's something to help them keep on top of things and keep monitoring through the day. For the lessons, as we said, lots of them are asynchronous at the moment, so the teachers are likely to give some introduction videos to the lessons, and then with every activity that's assigned, there will be differentiated tasks. You've got 3 screens there because there are 3 challenges, and the children will choose the challenge and self-assess and work with the challenge that is most suited to them. Some other ways in Key Stage 2 that we sort of set things out would be by making sure that the children have clear understanding of the learning objectives there on the screen in front of you, just in case it's a little bit small and blurry. It sort of highlights the self-assessment, so the children have clear expectations. It says, you know, I can explain the movement of the moon, I can explain that the moon orbits the earth and not the sun, and the children will be tracking and monitoring and judging how well they've progressed through that. Just as Jenny said at the beginning, that's exactly the same sort of thing that happens in class. We've just translated it to the online experience.
And not only is it the same thing that happens in class in a primary school, it's the same thing that happens in class in a secondary school. I think what's slightly different online, in the past, if you were at school, you probably wouldn't necessarily set all of the activities to complete by the end of the lesson. So the expectation is at JESS Secondary is that teachers explain what needs to be completed by the lesson, but also have the learning objectives and success criteria clear for the students. At the beginning of distance learning, 7 weeks ago, I would say in week 1, the real focus was around engagement and our students completing tasks. But we've now, we're now in week 7, and the focus needs to be on how well do we know whether students have understood, and do they have the knowledge that we're expecting, and can they apply that knowledge? So I'm going to share some examples from the secondary school for formative assessment and some examples of what's happening during the lessons. OneNote really comes into its own here for us at JESS. So the example I've shown you, I have in front of you, is a sports science example. The student, if it's a little bit small, has shown their knowledge and understanding in black. Because it's in real time and it's a synchronous model that we've gone for, the teacher in red, in the same way in a lesson that they would walk around with their red pen, they're doing that in real time on the OneNote page. And then you can see underneath that the student has responded to the teacher's feedback, and the same below. If you're using OneNote, the Review Student Work tab really allows you to work through the books and move backwards and forwards. So instead of walking around the room, you're going up and down the list in the same way. I suppose it's like Ross McGill's example from his Mark Plan Teach book of live marking in a lesson. One of his other examples you're probably familiar with is yellow box marking. This is actually one of our maths teachers, Rena's used pink box marking. And you can see in the yellow circle that she's left some verbal feedback. So the student didn't understand or made a mistake with this question. The teacher spotted it, left a voice memo. But what's really important is that the teacher then checks that the student has responded to the feedback to make sure that they have actually understood. So we're using this as a method to check for student understanding. In the same way that you in class would verbally ask questions, we're using the posts wall on Teams to ask questions. I would say what we've learned here is that when you're asking a question, so here, how is love presented in the poem? For some of our vulnerable students, or our students of determination, or students who aren't as confident, it can be quite daunting to write an answer on a wall where all of the other classmates, or where the classmates can see. So we've started to use channels. So in the same way you would have a small group sat at a table together, we put the small group into a channel, and then we ask the question in the channel, so it's only to a small audience, and then you can differentiate by student grouping. I'm sure lots of you are using online quiz and online questionnaires. This is an example from Forms. I know there's lots of free platforms out there, but what we've been trying to work on is make sure that these assessment opportunities are embedded with timing, like time limits. So the teacher here has distributed this at 9:30, and the students only have 10 minutes and then it's closed, so they can't work on it anymore. This is really important because obviously it prevents the students perhaps from looking on Google or working with their sibling or parents. So it's a workaround. I'm sure there's plenty of places where it hasn't been seamless, but it's an idea. This is an example from our maths department using quizzes. Again, an example where you can see common misconceptions. So this question 9, 7 students had made a mistake on it. So the teacher can use this to inform planning, and then the next lesson start by explaining question 9. So looking for lots of opportunities to assess student understanding. Polly, you may be familiar with. Another questioning tool that we've been using. I haven't used this one too much, but I've heard the history department are using this. It's called Kylo. I don't know if that's the right pronunciation, I hope so, but the students here probably don't realise that the teacher is assessing their understanding in quite the depth that they are, because they're engaged with a debate. So they submit their point, the teacher can assess their understanding, and then the students get to vote. So at the top you can see the debate going on. I thought that was a really nice example.
Yeah, and moving across to the primary school, looking at similar examples, and as Jenny and I have put this together today, I guess we wanted to thank all the teachers at JESS as well for being so willing to share their work across Dubai. So thank you to them. Again, in Seesaw, this is just an example of, you can see there it says week 6 English Thursday. The piece of the activity has been shared by the teacher. And then below are the images of the students' work returned. So there's a nice dashboard of all of the work returned, and you can see the highlighted and annotated elements to it. And one of the reasons why I wanted to copy in this picture is because even though we're online, you can see they are all pieces of paper. The children are still keeping up with their handwriting, and we're trying to keep a mixture of digital and traditional and formal and practical pieces of work. Great. And very similar, all the things that you've seen that Jenny has sort of showed that the secondary school teachers are doing, the primary school teachers. First of all, you've got the warm-up on the left-hand side where the children have answered in red and the teacher has come back and marked in blue. And this has given the teacher a clear assessment point, a judgment where they can decide whether a child can or can't do anything. And similar to Jenny's, if they can't, next steps will be provided. Sometimes the picture on the right is just demonstrating again that the children has worked. It's a year 1 boy. He's worked on paper, then it's come back onto Seesaw, and the teachers created a video of feedback there. We've got a little video to show you here. What you can see in front of you again is a year 2 child's piece of work. The task is that they are up-leveling sentences using adjectives and conjunctions. So the teacher's been through and marked it. You can see the highlights in green. And then what the teacher does then is provides extra feedback by recording a short video for them over the top. So Jenny, if you don't mind playing that for me, please.
Have in your mind for the next time is to try to challenge yourself with some of those conjunctions that Miss Green talked about. So because, so, but.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. It's just quickly to show you the different ways in which, using that software, the teacher can add and mark work and feedback almost as if you were in a live lesson. And again, this was because this child was a more able writer and actually is very capable of using conjunctions. And Jenny, Miss Johnson was relying on her knowledge of what they could do before they came into distance learning, and is looking at the work they've done now, and then is setting that next step to go because of the level that the child is at. And next slide. And this is just a quick visual. What you can see there in the top right hand corner is the work that the child submitted, and then underneath is a conversation that's been had by the children. So even though it's asynchronous, the teacher has left a piece of feed forward comment, and the child has replied and changed things, and then the teacher has commented again. So use of verbal feedback has been incredibly powerful over distance learning for us. And the next one, again, similar to as Jenny was talking about earlier on, we have peer feedback and peer help and peer assessment. And what the teacher's done here is the teacher has created a post, I think using Padlet, and she's just said, it's really, really simple idea. Just create a post and type in any words or phrases you do not understand from this lesson. Perfect. And then the children have come in and they've started writing. They were learning about the rainforest and tribes, and they've written about chaponos, and they don't know what that is. And 2 or 3 comments underneath, they've got the answer. A chapono is where people of the tribe sleep and live. So it's a fantastic little example of how they're working with each other to help each other. And,
nice geography, Luke.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. And what we noticed as we were putting this together is there's a real commonality between what we're doing in the primary and the secondary school. And quite often, it's not just about the destination, it's about the journey. And I'd like to explore that a little bit further by going into the early years a bit. So in the early years, we described the growth of a child like a plant, and we could see everything that was in the trunk of this plant, which is their communication and language and physical development, etc. And then that flourishes into the tree, and that's all their literacy and their maths. But underneath everything, in the roots, they're the characteristics of learning, the active learning, the critical thinking, the playing and exploring. And what we realized is we were seeing a lot of the above ground, But what we were actually getting is when we were saying make this task, we were seeing 22 of the same task. We were seeing the finished product all the time, but we're always left wondering, well, how did the child get there? What was that process along the way? And so we've tried to flip the script a little bit, and we've said to parents about sharing us the video of the child engrossed in the task, making sure they send work that has mistakes in it, making sure that they share with us when things are going wrong, making sure they're sending us things where the children are playing and exploring rather than the finished product. Because what we want to do is we want to observe the task in action, if you like. And what we're hoping to see is a new skill they've learned, or an emerging interest, or a new challenge they're facing, or something that they're struggling with. And on the next slide, I'm going to do something that would it'll probably be quite uncomfortable as a presenter, but we're going to play you an audio clip, and you can see what I mean. And this is a mum working with her son, and she's doing an absolutely amazing job, and he's reciting the phonics and the sounds, the first phonic sounds that he's learning. And what I mean by this is a verbal audio clip where you can really pick up what it is this child needs to work on. So there's going to be a bit of silence as you can hear his cognitive, as you can hear his cogs whirring, but you'll get there in the end and understand what I mean. Thanks, Jenny.
I'll press play.
Yes, please.
Hi, Nicholas. Can you tell Mummy what this letter is? And what's something that starts with the letter S?
Snake.
Snake. Good job. What's this letter?
Ah.
What's something that starts with the letter A?
Apple.
Good job. What's this letter? T. And what's something that starts with the letter T?
Tennis ball.
Tennis ball. Good job. What letter's this one? P. What starts with the letter P? What's something that starts with the letter P?
I don't know.
Thanks, Jenny. And that small little clip there highlights what we're trying to say. It's about the journey. That little, hearing that young man say, I don't know, has given me one of the most powerful assessment points in terms of what we need to do next for him and for his learning. We've got all his strengths and the things that he knows, but now we can prepare things and adapt what he needs from distance learning. And it's brilliant, and it's actually really difficult for the parents to send in things where their children perhaps don't have everything in the whole package, but that's what we're trying to do. And if I just show you onto the next slide, and again, this is in the early years, and you've got some youngsters on a video call with their F1 teacher there. And as the F1 teacher is talking to them, again, they're looking through their phonics and their sounds. And at the end of the video call, we've asked the parents to write us in a note, and the note there is a fantastic note from the mum, because what she's doing is she's again willingly telling us the bits that are not working. So she said, good morning, lovely to see you all. As you can hear, she is great at recognizing her sounds, but just finds blending the sounds a bit tricky. And then there's a wonderful note then that the teacher leaves. And the reason we've got this as an example is because this feedback is different because it doesn't go to the child. This is the feedback for the parents, especially in the early years, trying to help them on the journey. Do you mind playing that for me, please, Jenny?
Hi, it was lovely to see you this morning, and it was great that Miller was more confident on the video call, because I know it's a bit strange, isn't it? It's strange for me as well. You're just not yourself, and I can see that the children will get better as the weeks go on. What I want to say to you is Miller's doing really well. She's doing amazing with the phonics. I was really pleased before we left school. Basically, the stage that we're at is something called oral segmenting and blending. So it means that rather than being able to see the letters and segment and blend, so say for example, if you said to Miller, Miller, I want a jar of jam, she can say jam to you. If you say to her,
thanks, Jenny.
Miller, I really like a at, and she can.
And this is again another perfect example of how involving the parents in this learning process. She's highlighted that sound that she's finding blending tricky, and the teacher's able to say, and I really like the fact that she says, you know, based on what I knew in school, And based on what I've seen the journey being, this is where she's at next. And actually, this is how I can help you at home. Let's do some of this sounding out and oral segmented and blended. And the parents have a great idea, and it works really well.
In both the primary school and the secondary school, we are using live lessons with the students. In the secondary school, it's 1 in 3 as a minimum, but we're finding that many teachers are opting for more. And the reason behind that is because obviously in school, effective questioning is what we rely on to assess student knowledge and understanding. Cold calling, an idea you're probably familiar with from Teach Like a Champion. It's talked about a lot in education, and I think it's coming into its own with Teams video live lessons or Zoom live lessons, whichever platform you're using. So many times as a senior leader, I'll go into lessons when I'm doing learning walks, and you see teachers put an open question out to the group looking for volunteers to answer the question. And you know, it will always be the confident ones that come back, but that doesn't show you and help you to assess understanding. Whereas on a live lesson, if you're to do that, I'm sure you've had it already, you kind of just sit there and wait, and you're just wondering if anybody's there. Whereas with live lessons, you have to ask the question to a specific child. So Luke, what do you think about da 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 da? And that's a really nice way of checking for student understanding. Think, pair, share, another great questioning technique. So online, the way that looks at JESS, start the lesson as a group, as a large class, and then send the students off into their channels, which are their groups. So go back to your group, discuss your answer, and they start a video in their channel, and then they come back to the main channel with the whole class to then share. So again, like I said at the beginning, replicating the good pedagogy that you know well into an online environment. Whole class response, you know, you go around lessons and you see everybody in the class with their whiteboard up, holding up the answer. It's a great way to check quickly for the whole class's understanding. So you can still do that online. You can ask the students to all share their screens, and they can use the whiteboard facility, or they can use a OneNote page, and they can replicate that idea from school. I know that the disadvantage at the moment is full screens on Teams. If you're using other platforms, you might have more success with that strategy. So we're really looking forward to the update that's coming this month with more screens from Microsoft.
We are going to have another vote now, I believe. This will be interesting for me. We're going to go back to menti.com, and I think Nada's going to help us out with that. So I think, again, possibly you will be already logged in. I'm hoping so. And we've got a vote on your preferred method of feedback so far. So if you head back over to mentimeter.com, the code is at the top if you've logged out. And we're interested to find out. So we've just gone on for some time, and maybe Nada will be able to come in and give us an idea shortly about our time limit and how quickly to get through the next part. But we'd be really, really interested to know what the majority of your feedback is so far, and what you're doing with your students. And interestingly, as we're watching this, verbal is taking an early lead, and it does make me question whether you're using verbal feedback a lot in normal practice, and whether that's why it's replicated here, or whether it's just the preferred method from distance learning. And these are the sort of things that might affect us as we head back to school. If we've changed our practices quite significantly, I know lots of the teachers are using verbal feedback at JESS. If they're using that at distance, will they use it when they return to school? certainly hope they'll be considering the lessons that they've learned across the board. Excellent, thank you. And Nada, I know you didn't want to jump back onto the mic at this point, but do you mind just giving us a quick time check from your end? We're all good. Okay, fine. Thumbs up. All right. Okay. we'll keep plowing on then. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Great.
so I'll just share my screen.
Verbal and written feedback are the most. Yeah, we were expecting that, and I think it's interesting to see that verbal is leading the way there.
Thanks, Jenny. If you could share your screen.
Yeah. Okay, so I thought it. So we've been talking, Luke and I as well, about the challenges that distance learning presents us with. Similar to you, you'll be maybe more in the primary school or the lower years of secondary, wondering how much adult support there's been while students are completing their tasks. It's a bit of a tongue-tie, Googleable answers, and students looking online for answers and finding or working with their peers on other platforms. We know at JESS that while a live lesson is going on with a teacher on Teams, the class are also on another device as a class group on Zoom. And so, you know, students are communicating, which I think is a great thing and we shouldn't be afraid of, but we do need to be mindful of that when we are assessing students' work. We also need to be mindful of those students who aren't adequately accessing distance learning and whether they're disadvantaged, as well as our vulnerable learners, and not just students of determination, but other vulnerable learners who are finding this time quite difficult. It's a time of high anxiety for some students. Everybody's got their own circumstances. So these are the challenges to bear in mind when making your judgments about student progress. In the secondary school, we've been trialing different assessments, different summative assessments with the things that I've just mentioned in mind. We have a culture of academic honesty that's been embedded into the secondary school for many years now. Academic honesty is built into our behaviour policy. We regularly talk about academic honesty in assemblies, and it's followed up through PSHE days and also through each subject area. We use Turnitin as a platform further up the school, but it's something that we're very mindful of. What we've been trying to do as we think about summative assessment is think about assessments that are applying knowledge as opposed to checking for knowledge and recall, looking for conceptual understanding, because that really does give you an indication of where the students are at in your class. And so I'm going to talk through some of the examples happening at secondary. When students are sitting assessments, maybe they're tests at the end of unit tests, or maybe they're written assessments at the end of a topic. Some of the teachers have been talking about screens on or screens off. So setting the test and then asking the students to keep their screen and their microphone on so that you can hear where the students are looking to their textbooks, or you can see where their eyes are wandering. Something that you might want to try. I don't think it's foolproof, but it's something that's been happening. I'm not sure the students in this particular example are sitting in assessment, but it's a photograph that I got today from one of our teachers. You know, falling back to those longer pieces of assessment, these are harder for students to Google and find answers to if you're being creative with your questions. And also, you know, going back to the marking criteria grids that you will have been using at school. So the teacher here has handwritten and to this student and marked by hand, and then Office Lens and put the work into their OneNote. So I said to you at the beginning, we're not paperless. We still work on paper, but we just office lens and stick everything in. Our language, this is another example from English. I thought it interesting on the Mentimeter votes that not many people looked at video for assessment. I actually think it's a missed opportunity because it's harder for students to look to Google or to have help from their parents or from their siblings if they have to video themselves explaining. So this example here is from the English department. This student is showing their analytical understanding of a Shakespeare play, and I think they're talking about the character Othello and his downfall. So again, if this was written, you might be questioning, where did that student get the knowledge from? But if it's a video clip, it does eliminate a little bit of that. So presentations and video clips, I think, are really powerful for us all to think about. In the languages department, they've been trialing a platform called Education Perfect. And you can see that this platform provides information. Here we go, was not in full screen mode, lost focus on the exam window. It might help you as a teacher if you see this as a repeated pattern to wonder why they're not having, why they've lost focus or why they're not in full screen mode. Be careful, because it doesn't mean that they are on Google and finding their answers there. But if it's a repeated pattern and the data from this assessment doesn't tie in with all your other data, then it might make you question the validity of the data from this test. This is an assessment that we tried with year 11 at the end of the year. So instead of year 11 sitting traditional exam questions, we gave a brief to our middle leaders to set tasks that assess conceptual understanding. So open-ended questions that don't have a finite answer, that require students, like I said before, to apply the right knowledge at the right place rather than recall. So that will allow you to have a better appreciation of where that student's level of understanding is. Our psychology department, using Microsoft assignments, it's really nice because when you set the time limit for the test, the students have to submit, and well, it closes for them. You can see that student 1 has not handed in their work, so you may be questioning that they have some issues with their tech, or you might want to explore what the problem is. Student 3 handed in their work 1 minute late, but that coincided with the fact that they were 1 minute late to sign in for the lesson. So you could probably think, okay, that's fair enough. But if you look at student 2, they were on time for the lesson and signed in on time, but they were 8 minutes late to finish the assessment and hand in their work. So that might prompt you to wonder whether they were looking to Google or looking elsewhere for answers. Like I said before, it doesn't mean that they are, but it might just raise your attention to that. Summative is another platform being used across JESS secondaries. I'm sure it is in lots of schools. What I'm told is particularly good by our teachers about Summative is that you can set the questions, and the questions can be in a jumbled up order for each student. So if they are sat separately on a Zoom call out of your eyesight, it will be harder for them to work together on the test questions. The head of DT was also telling me about being really careful with the wording of the questions. So here, if you were to have the question as what is true of a superalloy, that's probably much easier to find quickly on Google. Whereas if you change it to not true and it's a negative, again, it just makes it a little bit harder for the students, which means it will take them more time. And if you've set good time limits, it should eliminate some of the issues of them looking elsewhere for answers. In this example from the history department, I thought this was a nice example. The students were sent the question, they were sent the mark scheme, but they were given different sources when they were distributed the assessment, and the page was distributed at the beginning of the test. The page was locked at the end, and they were able to work with those sources. And the history department here were assessing critical thinking, which this allowed them to do. So hopefully you can see some different examples across secondary of how we're trying to eliminate the issues that online learning presents. I'm not saying it's foolproof, but Luke and I have talked a lot about setting these things up to suit the majority rather than the minority. We know in school there are some students who get it wrong and copy off their friends in year 7 or 8 on their homework, or they, you know, an extreme example, there may be examples of plagiarism with IB coursework. It happens, and it will happen in this environment. But what you can do as teachers is put as many things in place as possible to eliminate that and try and prove to the students that you're 2 steps ahead of them.
In primary, yeah, we try, I'll keep this brief as I can. In primary, we try and avoid the term summative assessment, and we try and say low stakes test. And if I'm honest, yeah, Jenny, if you don't mind clicking, if I'm honest, we'll try and avoid even saying low stakes test at all, and just try and wrap them up as fun quizzes or things like that. I think it would be really worth me mentioning at this point that we do have access to Century Tech, which is free at the moment. We're just getting the message that we'll need to move quickly on this. But this sort of, again, is another tool you'll be able to get your assessment criteria from, etc. And then on the next slide, the interesting thing about Century is that, can you go to the slide before, Jenny? Is that all right? Sorry. Yeah, just again, as Jenny said, it sort of looks at the amount of effort, the amount of time spent on different activities, etc. Okay, Jenny, do you mind skipping forward to, yeah, keep going. A couple of other things we track using our mark books. So our mark books are objective-led mark books, which are tied to the curriculum, and again, similar in secondary. They have their mark books that they keep on top of, which is tracking students over time. And then very briefly at the end, we've got the fact that our middle and senior leaders quality assure as well. And so in that, you know, the examples of feedback can be subject specific, or they could be to do with the pedagogy and the style. And then
so we've created an opportunity in the way that we've set up our teams, so that there's an open door policy, so that middle leaders and senior leaders can go into any lesson. And obviously, looking through all the work as well, it's available there for everybody. I guess there's nowhere to hide at the moment, is there, for any of us? Luke and I summarised what we thought were the key takeaways from the presentation today. Just really, when you're assessing progress and you're trying to work out how much of the content the students have understood, don't forget how well you know the students. I said it at the beginning. Triangulate your data. The more opportunities you find for assessing students, the more data you hold, and that will help you to have a more reliable opinion of, make a more reliable judgment of their level. Assessing the process of learning, Luke mentioned, it's how you get there rather than necessarily the end point. We've seen that as GCSEs have been taken away, and that process of how you get there is so important in all of this. And that's what we're looking to focus on, embedding assessment opportunities to look for that. And I guess don't be afraid, have a go. It's okay to get it wrong. We've all been there. This is a journey for all of us, and we're happy to share our ideas. I want to thank our JESS colleagues for all of the ideas that they've shared with us. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Luke and Jenny, for the presentation. So we will now move into the question and answer bit of this webinar. So in the registration forms that you all filled in prior to this webinar, many of you have submitted questions that I will pose to Luke and Jenny.
I'm also going to try to include some of your live questions that I can see that you are posting in the chat in this webinar. So first, I'll start with this question. Okay, I'll start with this simple question. So how often do you recommend teachers assess students during these new times of distance learning? So Jenny, if you can answer that question, please.
How often? I think it's really important that schools follow their school feedback policy. So at JESS, that's what we're doing. We follow our school feedback policy. But obviously, because teachers are sat at home at the same time that students are working, they're in and out of books all day. And so looking for as many opportunities as possible, not only to check that the students are engaged and completed the task, but how do you know they've understood? So I don't think that you can put like a number on it and say, you know, exactly how often, but it's looking for the range of opportunities.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jenny. Also, just being mindful of the time, if you can keep the answers short. So next question is for you, Luke. What methods are you using to ensure parents do not complete the work for children?
Yeah, I think we covered a fair bit of this in the talk, but we're trying to change the narrative around it. I think we've got to accept and acknowledge the fact that parents are doing a brilliant job of not only looking after their children, holding up their jobs, but also helping to educate their children as well. And we've got the most large group of teaching assistants, learning support assistants that we've ever had. And what we say to parents is we turn around and say, you know, we love it when we see work that has mistakes. We love it when we see work that shows playing and exploring. We love it when we see the children in the middle of the task. And you know, if we can change the narrative to focus on that, then I think that helps.
Thank you, Luke. Moving on into the next question, which addresses the academic honesty. So how do you educate students about academic honesty? If you can answer this question, Jenny, please.
I think I mentioned it in the presentation. It's embedded into our ethos and our culture at JESS. We deliver presentations through assemblies regularly, also through our pastoral system, through PSHE days, and also within each subject. And it's tied into our behaviour policy, so that there are consequences if students do get it wrong, so that they can learn along the way from year 7 upwards. And it's the same online.
Awesome, thank you, Jenny. Next question, addressing the SEN students. So how do you assess the progress of students with determination? Please elaborate also on the various tools that teacher can use with those students. If you can give us like more insights, Luke.
This is a difficult one to keep brief, and I'll do my best. There's a lot of work that goes into making sure that you look after your most vulnerable learners. I think making sure that you take into account all of the access arrangements that you had in place before you left school. You take into account the different formats that you can use. You've got access to written, voice notes, screen sharing, modeling examples. We think that actually having a clear guidelines in place by making sure you've got distance learning, individual education plans are really useful. And then just making sure that those agreements are followed. If you need to, organise TACs, team around the child meetings to further understand how your vulnerable learners are struggling at home and how they're learning to adapt. Speak to the parents, speak to the children, and get a better understanding of how to look after them. But we've mentioned so many tools in the webinar today. I dread to think of adding any more, to be honest.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll move now to the live questions. I'll take 2 questions from the chat. So the first question, and please feel free, Luke or Jenny, to jump in and answer the question. So how do you assess FS students, and what tools you use to assess them?
So FS students, again, you assess them using your observation, teacher observation a lot of the time, and we've been trying to talk around doing what you can to be able to continue to do that. Yes, it's good getting the finished product sent in, but what can you do to get eyes on the journey and the process along the way? We're actually using the Early Excellent Assessment tool at the moment, and we've fiddled in Windows 1 and Windows 2 for Term 1 and Term 2. However, you know, they've put out some guidance saying don't fill in Windows 3 until we update what we're going to do with the software. And so we've actually taken a step back, and we're relying on experts around us. So don't worry and don't rush. Look in the field around you, get online, get on Twitter, get access to experts, and keep an eye out for what they're saying and what they advise.
All right. So last but not least, how did you approach academic honesty to ensure all forms of assessment are valid in a predominantly asynchronous setting? So think more in the primary setting where adult support is required a lot more.
So academic honesty again, yeah. I think Jenny mentioned the phrase that is really important. Make decisions on your majority, and then make adjustments for the minority. I think I had a chat to a parent who was very clear and said to me, why don't you want me to help? I've got time off work. I'm at home. I'm willing. I'm more willing than any other teaching assistant you'll ever have. Why don't you want me to help at this point? And I think he raised a really valid point. I know that we are worried in terms of the assessment of this and working out the independence, but you've got to try and help educate and help the parents understand when you're doing a round of assessment, a level of assessment, when you want to gauge what's happening, ask them to step back. Ask them to step back, and I think you've got to have faith in your communities. You've got to have faith in the children. I'm sure at JESS we don't have a lot of children who are lying to us and a lot of parents who are lying to us. They're just not in that game. So have a bit more faith in the community. Yeah, sorry, Jenny. And
I was just going to build on what Luke said. We've also held parent forums, and explaining what we're doing and why we're doing an assessment, and teaching and learning has been a big focus of those parent forums at secondary as well as primary. To kind of share the experience with everybody.
The only other thing we were hoping to say, just to help people, if you like, on this, and it's slightly going off kilter a little bit, is the fact that all of the tools, all of the things that we've looked at today, people might be worried about the cost that comes as associated with all of them. Lots of platforms at the moment have released their software for free and have been very mission-led and given opportunities. So we mentioned Century Tech, which is a assessment tool and an artificial intelligence tool, actually, which will help point in the new direction. There are things like Padlet and TinyTap, and even if you have a Microsoft subscription, there's lots of tools within Microsoft, and if you have a Google subscription, there's lots of tools within Google subscriptions as well. So please, we're more than welcome for our sort of Twitter details to be handed out or whatever, and you can get in touch with us and ask us if you're unsure about those free software. But if you don't have the resources and the budget, go looking for the free tools.
Okay, awesome. So that brings us to the end of the session today. Thank you very much. And I'll hand over to Neda.
Hello and welcome back. Well, thank you so much, Luke and Jenny, for your insights and generosity in sharing how your school is approaching assessment and tracking student progress. We really hope this was useful to all of you, or that it has inspired you to think of other approaches to tracking student progress and assessment. Now, I'm mindful of the time, and I know we've gone a bit over time, but we've just got a couple more minutes that would like to get your feedback on the presentation. So if you don't mind going back to menti.com and entering the code again, 896000, and you'll see our first question on the screen. And thanks, Luke, for pointing out the issue around resources and whether they're freely available. We've had quite a few questions about the platforms that you're using, so thank you for pointing that out. But there's been a lot of community spirit around the world that have provided these resources that were once at quite a bit of cost to almost free or at minimal cost. So thank you for that, Luke, as well. Okay, I'll just wait a couple more minutes to get a bit more feedback from you. We actually had around 190 people participate in today's session. So excellent participation and engagement. And sorry we couldn't get to everyone's questions, but we'll make an effort to respond to some of the questions that were asked on the chat. Okay, moving on to the next question. What did you enjoy most about the webinar today? I also heard some birds chirping in the background. I don't know whether it was in my house or your house, Jenny, but we could hear some birds tweeting in the background. I don't know if anyone else heard that too. I got to learn about many new online resources, real life examples. There were a lot of practical examples in the presentation, variety of assessment tools, getting to learn about new apps, the variety of ideas, dealing with an issue that is complex and concerns us all. And also just to let you know, this is part 1 of the assessment and student tracking webinar. We will be hosting another session similar to this next Thursday on the 14th of May. And also there'll be a third one as well a week later. So there'll be lots of information from different perspectives, different schools and different approaches. Very informative, good tools of assessment with well-organized feedback, willingness of the presenters and the school to share their knowledge. Yes, the generosity from JESS has been fantastic. Thank you once again. Perfect. Thank you so much for that feedback. The KHDA team and our JESS presenters are very much grateful for your feedback. Okay, moving on to the next question. And we've just got 2 more questions, I think. So I'm mindful of your time, but if you do need to go, that's perfectly okay. For those that are still on the call, what will be the first thing you plan to do to improve assessing the progress students are making during distance learning? No plans to change your approach? Investigate different progress tracking platforms? Engage students more in reflecting upon and assessing their own work? Prioritize effective monitoring and the impact of current practice? Use a triangulation approach when making decisions about student progress? Or you might have some other ideas which we'll get to on the next slide. Okay, fantastic. So the one taking the lead is investigating different progress tracking platforms. So a lot of those platforms that Jenny and Luke mentioned, I think will be investigated further by a lot of our attendees on this webinar. Fantastic, thank you so much. Yes, and using students to reflect upon their own learning and providing assessment of their own learning and knowledge. For those that did select other, or if you were inspired by some of the ideas that Jess touched upon, what other ways do you plan to improve assessing the progress students are making during this period? Are there any ideas that you would like to share? Perhaps there's something that your school is currently doing and is working quite well. It would be great to get your feedback here and share it with everyone else on this webinar. Encourage more video responses to students. Kahoot, I noticed someone said quizzes. Yes, Kahoot is quite popular among students themselves as well. Ask students to record videos of themselves explaining taught concepts. I really enjoyed those videos parents were sending in, showing real life examples of students learning in action. Jamboard for quick feedback. I'm not familiar with that one, but that's something certainly some teachers might look into. Whole class response using clickers. I'm not aware of that one, but again, this is great. There's lots of different ideas coming through. Cold calling. Yes, I found that a great technique too. Thanks, Jenny, for sharing that. Daily reflections, involve parents. Padlets, a lot of tech tools. Poly. Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. A lot of ideas there, which you'll be able to access by viewing the recording of this video and have that opportunity to go back and review some of these ideas that have been supplied by your colleagues around Dubai. Okay, and just moving on, thank you once again, everybody, thank you. KHDA has developed this in this Together Dubai microsite. There's the web address on the screen for you. This is basically a repository of free online resources to help you during distance learning period. You will find some tech tools that have been made available at no cost to schools during the pandemic. You'll also find resources around well-being, academic resources, information around COVID, policy information. So there's a whole heap of resources that has been made available to the education community from around the world. So please do look at that website. Also on that website, you will see a list of webinars that have been made available from international speakers from around the world, and you'll also find a list of upcoming What Works X webinars. You'll also find there a link to the previous webinars and the recorded videos as well. So please do feel free to check out that website. And finally, also just our What Works sessions are on every Monday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Also keep an eye on our social media and do share positive and good news stories to help us get through these very hard times. But you know, I'm confident that we will get through this together and come out hopefully stronger, more purposeful and kinder. The role of teachers has never been more appreciated until now. So huge gratitude to all the educators out there for playing such a significant role in this period. So thank you, heartfelt thanks from all of us at KHDA. I'd like to leave you now with a lovely video that I found.
Hey folks, Broadcast Cal here with a message for our teachers. If there's one thing we've learned so far during this phase, it's that our teachers are heroes. Thank you for figuring out distance learning. Hello. Thank you for setting up Zoom meetings.
Have a great day. Be safe, okay?
Thank you for the parades through our neighborhoods. Thank you for the calls, text, and emails that brighten our days. Thank you for loving your students, even from a distance. We miss you, teachers, and we are grateful for you. We love you.
Well, there we go. Thank you, everybody, and I wish you all a wonderful weekend ahead. Do get some rest, and